Please welcome Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer, AWS, CJ Moses.
Hello everyone. Before I get started, of course you're going to ask a question about these very bright shoes that I'm wearing. These are actually sort of a representative example or a symbol of the passion that I have for both racing and securing AWS. And over the next hour, I'm going to spend some time sharing some of that passion with all of you. We've had a ton of exciting announcements this week, and I think that we have some things in here that will actually add to those announcements that we already have. And I'm also very excited for the Chief Information Security Officer from United to join us a little later, Deneen DeFore. And she's going to join us and talk a little bit about her journey at United and how they went about implementing AWS in support of United Airlines. But I guess for those of you that don't know me, CJ Moses, the CISO at AWS, and I joined AWS 15 years ago this month. Back in 2007. Seems so long ago, and I feel so old now. And I've worked on everything from co-founding the virtual private cloud, then GovCloud, then the intelligence community, Amazon dedicated cloud, and now to leading teams that build the technologies that secure the services that all of you use today. And I'm excited that every day I get to learn about the problems we can solve for our customers and figure out how to do that, and how I can roll up my sleeves and continually raise the bar to meet security needs of customers. Every one of us is a builder at AWS, including me. In addition to being the AWS CISO, I'm also a race car driver, thus the shoes. I compete in SRO GT America, powered by AWS, which is an international sports car series, like what you see behind me. And there are interesting parallels between racing and security. One is being data-driven. That is fundamental to both security and successfully competing on track. There's also safety. It takes teams to make racing safe, just as we team up with our customers to help them operate securely. One thing that has been consistent throughout my 15 years at AWS is the relentless pace of innovation we've achieved because of customers like you and the feedback you provide to us. Customers are always wonderfully, beautifully unsatisfied. Stole the quote from Jeff Bezos, obviously. But even then, when they report being happy and business is great, sometimes they don't know it yet, but customers always want something better. And the desire to delight customers drives us to invent on their behalf. It may sound odd for some, but for AWS, unsatisfied customers are a gift. It gives us an opportunity to build more capabilities that make it easier for customers to get their security, risk, and compliance, to meet their security risk and compliance goals, and then for them to identify new problems they want us to build solutions for. It's an effective, tight feedback loop, and it's a core tenet of everything we do. Customer obsession and working backwards from the customer and their problems. More than 90% of all the things that AWS has created as a product came directly from customers. And the other 10% we invented on behalf of customers. To back up a little bit, before I joined AWS, I worked at the FBI. And part of our mission was counterterrorism. My team there got a copy of every piece of digital media collected in support of the counterterrorism mission in order to correlate it against everything else that we knew. Our goal was to prevent bad things from happening to good people, and my goal at AWS remains the same today. Back then, every Friday at 4:30, it seemed, you could think of a digital truck that would back up and unload terabytes of data for us to sort and analyze. We're talking 20 years ago. Now I'm really dating myself. I am getting old. When terabytes of data was akin to petabytes today. It was big data before the era of big data. We were looking for that one bit in those billions of bytes to identify potential threats and protect people. It was beyond a needle in a needle stack. It was a pile of needles stacked together. And the question was, which one of these needles has the potential to lead to a bad outcome? The stakes were, and still are, incredibly high. Zero margin for error. And we were constantly buying new hardware to handle that amount of data. It was a challenge to keep up with. It took months and months to procure and to set up the hardware, much less get the money to do so. When we saw AWS launch this thing called Elastic Compute Cloud, that was intriguing, and it sounded like a game changer to us. But suddenly, they were creating the idea of having 1,000 computers processing data in 1 hour, rather than the 1,000 hours on one computer that we were used to. And thinking about what they were doing, they probably had the scale for what we needed. Being able to decrease the time to actionable results was perfect for our life safety mission at the FBI. So we started discussions with Jeff Barr, who most of you probably already know or have heard of, our chief evangelist. If you don't know him, just look for the purple hair, and you'll know it's Jeff. But after a few months of deep dive conversation, everyone realized AWS at that time was not yet equipped to handle our use case with classified data back in those early days in 2007. But AWS wanted to fix it. They wanted to fix the fact that they couldn't do that. They wanted to work backwards from our problems and our challenges. It was a huge national security problem where the stakes are as high as they can be. And that's when they offered a few of us from the Bureau the opportunity to join AWS and to help build out the technology needed to meet the needs of not only agencies like the FBI, but enterprises to run highly sensitive and business-critical workloads at phenomenal scale. So I joined AWS in December 2007, and the next month we were knocking on the door of a data center near Dulles Airport in our US East region. It wasn't necessarily the US East region back then, it was the region. That gives you a little bit of the timeline. And that's where we went ahead and were going to try to solve the problem of how we were basically going to isolate workloads within a data center. Things were a little different then. If you don't know anything about our data centers, you just don't knock on the door. There are now layers upon layers of security at the data centers. Employees or the public just can't walk up and knock on the door and go inside. But back in those very early days, they were told to expect us. So after checking our access badges, and they let us in and took us to a room in the corner of the data center that was completely empty. No desks, no phones, no nothing. And that's when they said, that's your space, make it the way you want. So we dragged some Cat5 cables down the hallway. Wi-Fi was not allowed back in those days, and pulled the beanbag chairs in to sit on. It was very much a scrappy startup environment. We eventually upgraded to cubicles as AOL was downsizing. I'm sure at least some of you here remember dial-up internet and the, you've got mail voice. I tried to do that, but my voice, after talking to many of you customers this week, is almost gone. So we got their hand-me-downs from AOL for 10 cents on the dollar. True frugality. We iterated on a lot of ideas on how to isolate data and workloads at the network level. We analyzed things like creating separate VLANs for each customer, like we did for various community customers at the FBI. But then you're severely limited by the maximum number of VLANs, and VLAN isolation lacked any of the security requirements that we would normally need. We kept coming back to the specific use case of the FBI collecting, organizing, and sending out classified data to multiple agencies, and how those isolated workloads running in the data center, and how a lot of that problem is applicable to enterprise workloads. So we came up with the idea of virtualizing the network layer, where we could easily carve off a chunk of the network for each and every customer. It wasn't easy. Like I said, it involved dragging a bunch of Cat5 cables around, experimenting with physical routers, creating our own network protocol, which some of you may have heard about. There's been sessions here at reInvent over the years. That protocol was called Novice. This was a scrappy solution at first, but through iteration, it improved and scaled, and the core work was all done by a small team in the corner of a data center, working in second-hand cubes from AOL in just a few months. It's a huge, huge bet, but we launched Virtual Private Cloud after all that work. I was presenting this AWS technology to public sector customers in these days, and they were astounded. It's exactly what they've been looking for, to be able to use the cloud within their own isolated network environment and take advantage of the scale, elasticity, and pay-as-you-go pricing model that was and is still very attractive. The idea of cloud bursting via a VPN from their on-premises data centers into their own logically isolated part of the cloud was just the beginning of what was to come. We've grown a tiny bit from the half dozen services we offered back then. Seriously, though, it was hard to imagine that those building blocks would lead to more than 200 services with millions of customers and an $82 billion annual run rate business. It's our scale and experience that have given us the opportunity to help millions of customers operate securely, even customers with the most sensitive and mission-critical workloads. You may have heard belated VP Jacob Levinon's quote, "There is no compression algorithm for experience." It's a proven fact. We apply all of our experience and lessons learned from scaling globally and securely every single day. And customers benefit from it. Security is our top priority at AWS. For us and for our customers, we're never done innovating to help keep AWS and our customers secure. Because of our scale, with millions of customers operating on our global infrastructure, AWS handles billions of distinct customer activities from APIs to logging and back again. But we also track quadrillions of events. That's quadrillions, 15 zeros, almost takes up the whole slide. And we used learnings from everyday events, corner cases, creative uses of our services to help secure our customers by continually updating services like GuardDuty and Inspector based upon the things that we learn and we're observing from all of that data. We've probably done hundreds of things behind the scenes in any given month to secure workloads without anyone knowing how we're protecting them and continuing to raise the bar. And that ties into the shared responsibility of security in the cloud. We can think about it going back to the parallels between racing cars and security. Teams make up the pit crew, those who maintain and alert us of issues on the track. Those of us who build and prepare the race cars are responsible for making the underlying infrastructure of racing safe. But it's up to me, the driver, to ensure I'm operating safely and securely, similar to the shared responsibility model of security in the cloud. AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, from the data center perimeter to the hardware inside to the hypervisor that we provide for hundreds of services. And customers, the drivers, are responsible for security of what they run in the cloud. And this is something to remember. If you have access or control, you have responsibility. I'm going to say that again. If you have access or control, you have responsibility. That said, we don't ever leave you alone on your side of the shared responsibility model. We never stop working to make it easier for you to be successful when managing your responsibilities with better defaults, better tooling, better analytics, and better monitoring and alerting. But you often get the question, with the scale of AWS, what are you seeing out there in terms of security? Show of hands in the audience. How many of you actually wondered or asked that question? What are we seeing? Well, I'm going to talk about a few of those, and we normally in the past haven't done this, so hang on, I've got a lot to share. What we're seeing is common, and known security threats continue to proliferate. The good news is these are easily fixable and preventable with the right security fundamentals in place. Distributed denial of service attacks remain a common security threat targeting the availability of infrastructure and applications. From January to September of this year, we saw the volume of DDoS events rise at a rate of 35% over the previous period of the year. In September of this year, we prevented EC2 instances from participating in 106,000 DDoS attacks. In Q3 of this year, we reported a 256% increase in compromised EC2 instances to the AWS Trust and Safety from the fourth quarter of 2021. If you're not familiar with AWS Trust and Safety, it's an internal team that contacts customers when we see an environment that may have been compromised, that has been reported to have bad behavior. We take it a step further after that, though, and reach out to organizations outside of AWS, where sources of malware or command and control servers are hosted. Organizations such as domain registrars, hosting providers, ISP, and others. With their help, we can go to the source and take down entire attacker networks. By working with the broader community, we strive to make the internet a safer place. AWS does a lot for you automatically, but customers should take action to further protect the availability of their applications and workloads by building a DDoS-resilient architecture using AWS Shield Advance and AWS WAF at the edge. AWS Shield can automatically detect and mitigate DDoS events, and Shield Advance integrates with AWS WAF, giving customers an advanced protection against bots, scrapers, and other unwanted sources using threat intelligence from Amazon itself. Again, the things we see, we help defend against. We're also seeing that threat actors are continuously trying to exploit application vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access to compute instances. Part of AWS's ability to provide strong security services is from the scale at which we listen. One example of this is that we run a network of sensors that simulate commonly used software and applications with versions with known issues. By listening, we are able to better construct our defenses and to provide security services to our customers that are already built with our threat intelligence as a key ingredient, like GuardDuty detections. As an example, AWS's sensors processed over 224 million malware samples over 6 months and distilled them down into more than 28,000 unique types of malware. That data informs the capabilities of our services to help customers stay secure. Customers should always ensure proper security and access controls for EC2 instances and use Amazon GuardDuty to help protect their EC2 instances with anti-malware and endpoint protection and scanning. Amazon GuardDuty can expose threats quickly across AWS accounts, EC2 workloads, container applications, and data stored in S3 using anomaly detection, machine learning, behavioral modeling, and threat intelligence feed from AWS and leading third parties can help to initiate responses. This is a service that's learning every day, and your instance of a service like this is augmented by the cloud's overall usage. That novel threat on Monday morning becomes a known quantity in minutes or maybe hours later, and both AWS and our partners are operating with customers to make sure the learnings get wide distribution. We're also seeing the importance of protecting against the disclosure of security credentials. The AWS Customer Incident Response Team found that ransomware events typically lead to the destruction of customer data. And the most common cause of customer security events is the unintended disclosure of security credentials and secrets. One of the most important best practices to protect against unintended disclosures of credentials is to enable, and if you haven't heard it yet this week, I'll foot stomp, multi-factor authentication, or MFA, and limit the use of root credentials. For human identities, we recommend using IAM Identity Center for centralized access management to all of your AWS accounts and applications. You can create identities in IAM Identity Center with flexible MFA options or connect to an external identity provider. Also, set up automated alerts and have a plan for responding to findings related to unexpected activity. The best place to start building your incident response runbooks is to look at findings that GuardDuty generates and make sure you have a plan to respond to those. Have a look at the AWS Security Hub, automated response and remediation solutions to see how you can get started. And ensure you have a backup and recovery plan and test it regularly. An untested plan is just asking for trouble. You can use AWS Backup for this. AWS Backup has helped customers protect over an exabyte of application data on AWS. Just over a year ago, we added a feature to help protect against ransomware called Backup Vault Lock. Using this feature, data cannot be deleted by even the most powerful administrator or except for pre-configured data retention and deletion policies. Tying this all together at the fundamental level means a defense in depth approach where you have the protections all the way from the perimeter down to your data. Don't let one line of defense be the entire equation. While there's a lot of hype around the phrase, this is the core, in truth, behind the idea of zero trust. Network access should never be your last line of defense. Network perimeters are still valuable, but they must be combined with identity and access controls all the way down to the data. These tools are stronger when used as part of a holistic strategy, because if an actor does gain access to your network, then you still have another layer based on the defense of IAM. And in addition to that, you need effective intrusion detection, active logging, and a least privacy scheme to act as your security differentiators. You want compensating controls throughout, where no single aspect of your security program is on the hook for everything. But there's more to the story when it comes to operating securely. Since becoming the CISO at AWS earlier this year, I've had the opportunity to talk to even more customers than I did before, thus my voice today. One common thread is having the best security tooling is just the beginning. We really have to focus on the human element of security. And I've been sharing with customers ways to prioritize building a security-first mindset within the organizations based on what we've learned at AWS. First, focus on educating people. Educating everyone about security, no matter their role or job title, is critical to operating securely. This includes everyone from software developers to customer representatives to the C-suite. Sharing common language to talk about security means proactively educating everyone on security best practices, expectations, and risks. When people are educated on security, they are empowered to make better decisions that result in positive security outcomes and better customer experiences. Education is just the beginning, though. You have to build a security-first culture that's going to align that knowledge with default behaviors. What people do naturally without really thinking about it is exactly what culture is. In a security-first culture, developers are aware of security requirements before writing a single line of code. Product managers think about security before architecting a new product or service. And the C-suite decision makers think about how security risks can impact the bottom line. Most importantly, a security-first culture enables everyone in your organization to always be aware of how crucial security is for customer experiences and why proper investment in security is business critical. It also creates a sense of ownership because security is everyone's responsibility. Hire and develop the best is one of our leadership principles. Attracting the best talent from diverse backgrounds and developing security leaders reinforces a security-first culture. Employees today expect companies to provide career paths, upskilling opportunities, and leadership development. At AWS, we offer internal mentorship and apprenticeship programs, certification opportunities, and provide many on-ramps for individuals who want to grow in their career, grow their career in security. It makes us a better org for it. Shift left and automate as much as you can. Embedding security as early as possible in the product development lifecycle leads to a better builder experience and more secure outcomes. Automating as much as possible also helps builders focus on solving high-value problems for customers. Technologies like automated reasoning, machine learning not only save time for builders, but can also quickly surface unknown security risks to help organizations better protect their infrastructure, applications, and customers. You should also invest in a dynamic workforce. The past 2 years have shown us anything, is that people want flexibility and choice in where and how they work. Securing the tools and environment employees use to work, no matter where they are located, helps keep organizations safe. But just like the builder experience, security for all employees should be easy, frictionless, as automated as possible. Make the secure path the easy path, and you'll get the outcomes that you want. Finally, do not make the security department the land of no. Make security the department of yes, but, or yes, and. The conversation starter is let's work together to figure out how to achieve your goal without compromising the security we need to maintain it, and even better, how we can enhance it in that same process. Together, these priorities can help organizations improve their security posture by focusing on people and the culture within their teams. Using the best security tooling helps build the foundation for secure operations, but raising the bar on security means building pillars on that foundation, where security-minded people are empowered and can create in a culture where security comes first in everything they do, through education, professional development, and making security as easy as possible for everyone so that your tools are as effective as they can be. Looking ahead to 2023, I've also been thinking about what customers should be expecting. We're still coming out of 2 years of unprecedented pandemic, where we have a dynamic geopolitical landscape. We're seeing an increase in activity from malicious actors. We also have immense amounts of data being generated, stored, and analyzed ever since cloud made it easy and cost-effective to do so. With all these moving parts between technology and humans, we're entering a time where it's going to have to be the right mix of tech and people. And here's what I think people should be thinking about in the coming year. Increasing threats and risks continue driving a shift to the cloud, where security will be built into everything organizations do up and down their technology stack and across their teams. More and more security can be thought of as a data science problem. But most customers have data on security coming from many sources. Customers have been wondering how they can possibly do anything with all of that data if it's all siloed and requires a bunch of data cleanup to make it accessible for analysis. That's why we're so excited to now provide customers with Amazon Security Lake. I know you may have already heard of this. We'll talk about it a little bit more, though. Amazon Security Lake automatically centralized security data from the cloud, on-premises, and custom sources into a purpose-built data lake stored in your account. Security Lake makes it easier to analyze security data so you can get a more complete understanding of your security across the entire organization and improve the protection of your workloads, applications, and data. Security Lake automatically optimizes and manages all your security data across accounts and regions at petabyte scale. And you can use your preferred analytics tools while retaining control and ownership of your security data. Security Lake implements the Open Cybersecurity Framework, an open source standard, making it easier to normalize and combine security data from AWS and a broad range of enterprise security data sources like our partners CrowdStrike and Wiz do. Now your analysts and engineers can get broad visibility to investigate and respond to security events and improve your security across the cloud and on premises. Something else we'll continue to see in 2023, as the scale of customers moving to the cloud grows, the need for security professionals is going to continue to grow with it. Diversity is a big part of the solution to this problem, and I believe that organizations that prioritize hiring people with diverse educational, career backgrounds, people who are neurodiverse, people from different cultures, and so on, will outperform in security than those that don't. Next, machine learning and artificial intelligence will add a critical layer of automation to cloud security in 2023 and beyond. Part of what has driven the success of AI and ML is the amount of data being generated is growing exponentially. In 2020, people created 1.7 megabytes of data every second. 150 exabytes of data have traversed the internet since its creation. And some projections say that 463 exabytes of data will be created in 2026. All of this data has been beneficial to training machine learning models for the growing number of use cases. But as organizations manage increasing volumes of data, identifying and processing sensitive data at scale is becoming more complex and expensive and time-consuming. Customers have been using Amazon Macy's machine learning and pattern matching capabilities to help discover sensitive data. Macie continues to evaluate S3 buckets for security and access controls to detect issues like unencrypted buckets, publicly accessible buckets, and buckets that are shared with AWS outside an organization. But customers have asked us for faster, more cost-effective, and an easier way to have more visibility into sensitive data in S3. So we listened. Amazon Macie now offers automated data discovery to automatically sample and analyze objects in S3 buckets to continuously discover unknown sensitive data across S3. Macie inspects buckets for sensitive data, like personally identifiable information, builds on an interactive data map of where your sensitive data is in S3, where it resides across accounts, provides a sensitivity score for each bucket. Macie now provides an interactive data map that'll help you identify where those risks are that need immediate attention and prioritize protection against those risks. And that ties directly into something else to pay attention to in 2023, identifying sensitive data, data protection. For example, customers rely on AWS Key Management Service, or KMS, to centrally and more easily manage encryption across their data, workloads, and applications to keep everything secure. There's some customers who have to follow very strict regulatory where their encryption keys are stored. And they've asked for an easier way for us to meet those requirements. So I'm excited to say that we now offer external key store for AWS the AWS Key Management Service. Customers can now store AWS KMS customer-managed keys outside of AWS on hardware security modules that they operate on premises or anywhere else they would like to do so. This new launch supports our new AWS Digital Sovereignty Pledge that we announced earlier this week. XKS supports all of the critical features of KMS and works with the over 100 AWS services that already integrate with KMS customer keys. Next, while organizations are going to invest more in data protection, they are also going to continue investing more in fine-grained access controls within their organization. Builder teams want to move fast to provide user seamless access to applications and data with a consistent user experience, while also having fine-grained controls over permissions. Security teams are building zero trust architectures that require users and systems to strongly prove their trustworthiness. Ultimately, access control is critical to business agility and strong security posture. Security can be a business enabler when access controls are flexible, granular, auditable, and scalable. But application developers often spend months building custom permissions at the expense of working on business logic of their application. Compliance teams also struggle to obtain visibility and analysis into what users are permitted to access. It's also difficult and costly for security teams to manage fine-grained permissions across custom-built applications. Applying the principle of least privilege within applications by enforcing least privilege and fine-grained permissions and evaluating every access request is also difficult. That's why I'm happy to announce Amazon Verified Permissions is now available in preview, a scalable, fine-grained permissions management and authorization service for custom applications. It gives developers a consistent way to define and manage fine-grained permissions across applications, simplifies changing permission rules without a need to change code, while also improving visibility to permissions. With Amazon Verified Permissions, application administrators get a comprehensive audit capability that scales millions of policies using automated reasoning. Authorization requests running through Amazon Verified Permissions are evaluated in milliseconds to provide dynamic, real-time decisions. The continual re-verification of user permissions helps align your applications to the principles of zero trust. Developers now have a more granular and dynamic access management solution with control of exactly what users are permitted to do within an application. Another trend I see continuing in 2023 is that by moving towards multimodal forms of authentication, the future of MFA will combine security with usability, ensuring that users have frictionless experience while improving their security posture. To help solve for this, AWS is now providing support for multiple MFA authenticators for customer root and AWS IAM users. Customers can now register up to 8 authenticators, choosing from a range of authenticator options to help raise the bar on their security. And if you need a security key, as part of the National Cybersecurity Initiative, we are offering free MFA security keys to customers here at reInvent as a thank you gift. Just go to the Security Identity and Compliance booth, 1335, in the Village, here in the Venetian. Also on the horizon, quantum computing is going to benefit security. Yeah, I said it. AWS has been working on quantum computing for several years, and quantum-resistant security is advancing in the form of cryptography. In the fullness of time, we expect quantum computing to help make things more secure, and you should make sure you're using the latest encryption methods to protect data today. While the encryption and signing algorithms we use in AWS today offer best-of-breed security with high performance, we're looking at what customers will need in the future. The emergence of quantum computing over the next several decades will likely make some of these algorithms unsafe for use and affect the forward security of customers' existing data. Now that NIST and the cryptographic community have collaborated and announced the new standards for quantum-resistant cryptography, we are engineering these proposed schemes into our existing protocols. And of course, this potential risk refers to asymmetric encryption. Our implementation of hybrid post quantum key agreement is one example. We've made this available as an open source in our signal-to-noise, or S2N, library for implementing TLS. We've also made these hybrid post-quantum algorithms an option for the TLS connections to public endpoints for 3 AWS services: AWS KMS, Certificate Manager, and Secrets Manager. Look for us to deploy more of this more in AWS services over time. The nice thing about our hybrid key agreement implementation is that it allows us to deploy these new designs and implementations alongside existing critical cryptographic solutions. This belt and suspenders approach ensures the current baseline of security, even if future research finds a weakness in newly defined post-quantum algorithms. We are actively working on this new TLS-related standard with the IETF, where Internet protocols are defined. As more post-quantum algorithms are approved for cryptographic operations, AWS will remain at the forefront in both implementing and optimizing them for our customers' production environments. In sum, I'm optimistic about the outlook for 2023 and to continue seeing customers innovate and grow their businesses within AWS. One example of a great success here is United Airlines, and I'm excited for them to be joining us here today.
This is the story of an airline. But wait, it's about more than just planes. It's a sci-fi story about a piece of trash that becomes sustainable aviation fuel. It's a rescue story about saving thousands of connecting flights. It's a romance, an adventure, a musical. But most of all, it's a people story, starring more than 80,000 hero characters on a mission to do good in the air and beyond. Because this is the story of an airline when good leads the way.
Please help me welcome Deneen DeFiore, and get that out properly. CISO at United Airlines. Thank you so much for joining us at reInvent. You know, it might have been a long trip, but I figure you probably have connections in the airline industry that can get you here.
Lots of planes I can use at my disposal.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, so many people around the world fly on United every day, me included. About to go over 50,000 PQP, so I'm looking forward to global services. Please. And the stakes are high when it comes to operating securely, where an impact to operations could affect millions of people. I'm curious to hear how you think about the relationship between security and resiliency when United chose AWS to run its workloads.
Sure. Well, first off, before I answer the question, I'm usually the one that has the cool shoes, so I'm very jealous right now. But anyway, yes. So at United Airlines, we value resiliency as a part of our digital strategy. As you all know, anytime you have to get a plane and passengers from point A to point B, there's thousands of interactions and dependencies on digital systems, technology, and data. And if those things aren't available, there could be a systemic kind of collapse within the system. So we definitely take resiliency seriously. But we have cybersecurity as a key part of that resiliency strategy. We fundamentally recognize that an insecure system, a vulnerable system, is not a resilient system. So we're building those types of requirements in from a cyber resiliency perspective to make sure that if we do have a security incident or an event, that we have those techniques and tools and approaches from a recovery process to lessen the impact.
Oh, that's great. So a lot of customers use services like Amazon GuardDuty that I was just speaking about to help with automation through anomaly detection, machine learning, behavioral modeling, and threat intelligence feeds. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
How does United use automation to help improve security and bake security into their products, services, and applications?
Sure. So we absolutely use services like AWS GuardDuty to help us with identification, detection, and response as well. And we're also doing things that are a little bit, we're trying to advance our capabilities as well too, so that we can understand how the threat actors are working, what our commercial tools entitlements are, and we're moving into more of a custom content development and custom detection type of model. So we're doing that. The other thing that is interesting is we're kind of in like a shift everywhere type of mentality, right? So from the left, the center to the right, we understand and we've recognized that developers kind of do their thing wherever they want, when they want it, right? So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have the tooling and the automation in place that can give us, control of our environment. So, for instance, from provisioning, the app devs have access to, secure, hardened CloudFormation templates. Their accounts are automatically integrated to a cloud posture management system. So everything that we are doing is consistent across the life cycle. We're absolutely going to lean into Control Tower to make sure that we are using the automation in that platform around, landing zone, provisions and landing zones, our security controls application, and also around access management.
Gotcha. So were there any of the announcements that we had this week that are beneficial or helpful to you?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to you there, so I was kind of taking notes while I was going down. We'll definitely be speaking some more.
No, great. So I talked a little bit earlier about the human side of security and how everyone should be a security owner. How do you build a security culture to make security top of mind for everyone, especially if they're shifting left, right, and in between?
Yeah, so the benefit that I have, and I am very fortunate to have this, is commercial aviation has been a safety-minded industry since the inception. So 100+ years that commercial aviation has, safety has been top of mind. So I'm able to use that as a leverage point for cybersecurity because we do have a cybersecurity safety component. At United Airlines, we start every single meeting out with, no matter what it is, with a safety briefing, and it's not just around knowing where your exits are, what an active shooter do. It's about cybersecurity. It's about emotional security and things like that. So it's a very comprehensive
Do
strategy.
they do the?
No, but that's a good thing. We should have a little choreograph. Yeah, for sure. But one of the things that we're doing is making sure that we're giving people the information around cybersecurity and digital risk management, I'll say, that is applicable to what they do on a day-to-day basis in the moment that they're doing it. So of course, I know probably everybody in the audience, right? You have your annual cybersecurity or compliance training that you sit through and everybody checks the box. But if you're able to, go in the moment, right, and just have those little blurbs of insights that people can start to condition themselves like they do with safety, it makes a difference. So for an example, when a flight attendant goes to pick up their new mobile device for their in-flight device, we give them information around how to secure the device, not only physically, but is logging onto applications securely, making sure their password is strong, understanding what an MFA, because we're implementing MFA everywhere, understanding what an MFA kind of bombing attack would be, and not to let that distract you and just hit that. So we're doing things like that. Another example would be like pilots who use iPads, electronic flight bags, and they have access to applications and data that allow them to plan their flight and get information to change the course of the flight if they need it and fly it operationally safe and secure. And part of their pre-flight checklist, what do they need to do from a security perspective? Is their iPad software up to date? Are there no vulnerabilities? Does it look like it's secure from a configuration standpoint? So we're doing things like that to reinforce that security culture because, just like you had mentioned in your previous segment, we as security professionals can't do like 80% of our job without everybody else doing something. Yeah. So that's what we have to do. And then lastly, we are moving into, and everybody is, in a mode where we're giving people autonomy to devices they use, data they use, technology use, and they have to be understanding around they have to have the information they need to make the right choices, or at least know the consequences of the choices they make. So that's kind of how we're approaching it at United.
Excellent, yeah. One of the things that we've done from an education perspective and trying to help others is our security training. We've actually made available for both individuals and organizations to download from learnsecurity.amazon.com. So you're able to actually download it, put it into your learning management system, and just use it. We iterated on it for probably the last 15 years or so. Right. So it's short, to the point, and also entertaining. Yeah. So I think that's some of the things that we've learned.
Great.
But so the past few years, a pandemic, a shift to remote work, an unpredictable, geopolitical landscape have thrust security even more to the forefront of people's minds. As a security leader who recently was appointed to President Biden's National Infrastructure Advisory Council, curious to hear what your top priorities as CISO are looking ahead to 2023.
Right. Yeah. So being part of the Presidential Council, the NIAC, I'm very proud and humbled and honored to serve that way. So we'll see how that goes.
And you're the only one from the airline industry.
I am. Yeah. So we'll see. Represent the airline industry, but I think there's a lot of things around nuances for particular infrastructure sectors. But the thing that we have to do from a cybersecurity understanding is that is an ecosystem. You're an airline, but you're dependent on the energy sector. You're dependent on the water sector. All those types of things. So we have to figure out how to look at systemic digital risk management versus cybersecurity for each of the sectors. So we'll figure out how to tackle that. But as far as 2023 goes, I kind of think of our priorities aligned to 3 different buckets. So I have and this term has been used before, but I like it, so I keep using it, is being brilliant at the basics, right? Yeah. So you have to have things like vulnerability management, right? And that has to be operationalized to just the way you do things. Yeah. But you have to continuously improve that and figure out what needs to get better. So for instance, we have to figure out, because of the way the threats evolve and the way they're accelerating, everybody's accelerating exploits, it's to say, okay, how do we identify vulnerabilities quicker, and then how do we remediate them in a more automated fashion? So being brilliant at the basics for that example. And then secondly, advancing our capabilities as our threat environment evolves and and the business environment evolves and regulatory. Yeah. Just let's put it out there as well too. So things like the increase of ransomware and disruptive attacks, and those weren't really there before. They were there, but they weren't top of mind. Top of mind was data protection, right? So we're trying to figure out how do we do things around shift our security programs and take concepts like workload segmentation and say, okay, historically it's done from a data type. Here's the PCI zone, here's the high-risk data zone. But what does that segmentation strategy have to look like, and what does that mean from an operational resiliency perspective? So these are the minimum viable operational applications and services that need to be up to run the airline. And how do you segment and look at that from an security architecture perspective and resiliency perspective to get it, to shift it that way? Because, data gets kind of popped all the time, that's, you're going to manage that reputational risk. But if I can't run the airline and I can't recover quickly from a cyber attack. So, we're advancing our capabilities. You talked about immutable backups as we, you have to be able to do that as well too. So those are, we're being brilliant at the basics, advancing our capabilities, and then lastly, we have to enable the business. You talked about, not being the department of no, right? I always say we have to enable secure outcomes for our business. And we have, United Airlines is in a huge growth trajectory right now. The airline industry is coming back with a vengeance, and I'm so happy about that. But that means we have almost over 500 planes in the next couple of years that are going to be inducted into our operation. And they're all connected aircraft. So that's a digital infrastructure that has to enable cyber safety, airworthiness, that wasn't there before. There's new types of planes. So we're building all that and ensuring a framework and continuous monitoring approach that will make sure that we continue to have that cyber safety built into that. And then there's also the customer side of that. So we're trying, we want to enhance the customer experience. With all that growth and new capabilities, we're really leaning into digital to have new ways to interact with our customers. And we also want to enable a digital trust concept with them to make sure that they understand and what the expectations are around that digital experience from a security, privacy, and data protection. So we'll start off with, I always say identity is kind of like the cornerstone of your, it has to be the cornerstone. So we're going to really take a look at what our customer experience is and how identity can help us enable that.
Gotcha. So, I said that you're the only airline industry representative on the council. Do you feel any extra pressure, stress? I could almost hear it in your voice when you were explaining all the things that you guys are doing. So is that something that,
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's a big responsibility, but I think, I've got a support of my whole company and the industry. The one good thing about, like a lot of industries and in cybersecurity is like, you know that you have to work at it collectively. So, like I said, being the only airline in that council, there's different representative in that council, there's different risks and nuances to the airline industry, but I really think it's more about, how do we make sure that we are taking those resiliency factors, cybersecurity, data protection factors across the critical infrastructure, and so what are the commonalities, and how do we kind of raise the baseline across those commonalities, and I think we'll all be better for it because of that.
Absolutely, definitely. So with the growing need for security professionals now and in the future, diversity of experience and backgrounds is going to be critical for success. I mean, what advice do you have for CISOs when thinking about building a talent pipeline and with diversity in mind, and how to encourage people from all backgrounds to consider security?
Yeah. So first off, I think, if you do have success stories in your organization around folks that didn't have a traditional cybersecurity career path, whatever that means. For me, talk about it and show it. You can't, they say, you can't be what you don't see. I don't have that. I have a degree in biology. I got into tech accidentally, and then I got into cybersecurity by chance, right? And, that was in 2008.
You're following my career path, Forrest Gump.
Yeah, so, and I never looked back. But there's so many people that are successful and have transferable skills that start out in communications or music or whatever. And to just make sure that people understand that you don't have to have a computer science or engineering or degree, or you hadn't had to be a hacker for the past 12 years to be successful, right? So I think it's about really demonstrating that. And then secondly, you have to be intentional about your, I'll say, inclusion strategy. It's not something that just happens. So you have to take a look at what are you trying to accomplish, what skills that you need, and where your organizational entitlement is, and then how do you cast the widest net to get those, to get people that can fulfill that. For instance, if you're going to build, third-party risk management is, that's supply chain, software supply chain, and all those things are really important issues for us all to tackle. There are tons of procurement, supply chain, sourcing professionals that do risk, supplier risk management every day. They do it from an operational standpoint, a quality, financial. They can learn how to do cybersecurity. So you got to take a look at what you're trying to accomplish, and then where you can cast the widest net to get those talented folks.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something there as well, that you can hire diverse people,
Yeah.
but if you don't have a culture of inclusion, you're
Yes.
not likely to keep
Yeah,
them.
that's right.
So maintaining that.
That's totally right. And I think that's one of the things to do is to look at, I every month look at the data and I say, okay, what diversity of experience and backgrounds and race and all that kind of stuff that you would typically think of, what does that look like from how we're bringing people into the organization? What does that look like from what are we doing from a career development and promotion perspective? And then what are we doing that from people leaving the organization?
Yes.
And then if you find data that points to say, oh, well, you know what? There's mid-career females that are exiting, at a higher rate. What do you do about this? So it's a dynamic thing that you really have to be intentional about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Deneen, I want to thank you for all your insights and sharing us on your AWS journey here. And I want to thank all of you for being here. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of the week. My voice is now almost completely gone. And I actually hope to see you all at Replay tonight, if I can make it. And definitely want to see you all at Reinforce next summer. So thank you.